Okay.
Hello, welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Fran Solomon.
And I'm Andy McNeil.
And we're thrilled to be your hosts for these conversations. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this program is to have a friendly chat with some amazing people and really to use that as a way to normalize and educate our Heal Grief community. Our guest today is Scarlett Lewis. Scarlett founded the Jessie Lewis Choose Love movement after her son was murdered during the Sandy Hook tragedy in December 2012. Shortly after his death, Scarlett decided to be part of the solution to the issues that we are seeing in our society today, and that also caused the tragedy. She created the movement and became an advocate for social and emotional learning that teaches children how to manage their emotions, feel connected, and have healthy relationships.
Welcome, Scarlett. We're so glad to have you with us. We love your organization, the Jessie Lewis Choose Love movement. Would you be willing to share the story and the mission behind your work, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Fran and Andy. Such an honor to be here with you all and your audience. I founded the Jessie Lewis Choose Love movement following the murder of my 6-year-old son in his first grade classroom at Sandy Hook Elementary School alongside 19 of his first grade classmates and 6 educators in one of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history. I realized that what happened was 100% preventable, and so decided to become part of the solution and realized that there is a proactive and preventative solution, and it's called social and emotional learning. And so my goal is to get that to every child. It's really the number one indicator of their future success, and it's really called essential life skills. It's something that we could all benefit from, actually.
Yeah. Well, I was noticing when I was looking through some of your information and a little bit about the movement that you started around this, and there are a number of components that are part of that. I was looking at very specifically I think it's the commitment that people would make toward, changing the way that they exist in the world. And so I wonder if you could talk some about that, tell our viewers some.
Absolutely. So this is a movement, and it's all about love, and love is what connects us all as human beings. We're all the same in the want and need to love and be loved, and that's belong and connect with one another. We need to connect for our survival. We have to actually learn, though, how to have healthy relationships, how to manage our emotions, how to be resilient, how to make responsible decisions, among other things. These are not innate within us, and that's what social and emotional intelligence is. And really what I learned following Jessie's murder, once I started researching a solution, is that even at 44 years old, I didn't have a lot of these skills and tools because, if you didn't learn them at home and you can't give what you don't have, and or in school, you become an adult and you don't necessarily have these skills and tools. And by the way, learning them really helped me through my grieving as well, to be resilient and to be able to turn around this tragedy and make it something that can help other people. And really the awareness piece is on our thoughts and what we think about every day. The latest neuroscience tells us that the majority of our thoughts, regardless of whether we're grieving or not, are negative and repetitive. And these are the same thoughts that create our perception of our reality. And unless you have awareness and a little bit of education, you kind of go through life with this negative bias. And once you realize it and you have some skills and tools, you can actually change the way that you think. Your glass becomes less half empty, more half full, and it really does help turn your life around. And really, you're the only one that can do that. But it's I realize the solution is pretty simple. It makes logical sense, and with us, it's no cost.
Right.
So, Scarlett, in prior conversations you and I had, you had shared the actual key words and the inspiration behind that led to your movement. Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. It was a few days after Jesse's murder, and the first time that I had gone home actually to get his clothes for the funeral. And it was on my way out that I noticed 3 words that Jesse had written on our kitchen chalkboard shortly before he died. He wrote, "Nurturing, healing, love." Now, these 3 words were written phonetically because he was in first grade and just learning how to write. But I was struck by them, realizing immediately that if our shooter, a former student whose mother had taught at the school, had been able to give and receive nurturing, healing love, the tragedy would never have happened. I knew that would be my purpose, and that is the foundation of our movement now. Those 3 words of nurturing, healing, love. They are what form a healthy, positive culture.
And if I can segue just a bit for a moment, one of the things that we also touched on was how your older son and the grief that he was experiencing, and how he felt a little on the sidelines. If you can share that experience for our audience.
It was really interesting because JT was in 7th grade. He was 12 years old when his little brother was murdered. And he was very angry, understandably. We were pretty much alone. I was a single mom. He didn't want to go back to school. I didn't want him to go back to school. He eventually did go back about a month later, but he had this feeling that nobody cared about him. And so he would come home for years, come home and he'd say, "Mom, nobody cares about me there." And I would say, "Oh gosh, JT, they do care. I've just gotten off of, the phone with your teachers and they're meeting and they're doing different plans for you. They care." Nobody could ever convince him that he cared. And finally, I was talking to now somebody who's become a very good, dear friend of mine, Diane Gray, who's the president of the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation. And I was telling her about the struggle that we were having. And she said, "Oh, that's easy." And I said, "What do you mean that's easy? We've been struggling with this." And she said, "Nobody has had the courage to validate his grief." And that struck me as truth. I realized in a 60 Minutes interview in our living room towards the end of JT's school career in Newtown, at least, when they asked him this question, "JT, did anybody ever ask you about your little brother or the tragedy when you went back to school?" And he said no. And that was not anything that I would have ever thought to ask him. But I realized that was why he didn't feel like anybody cared. Nobody had ever asked him about Jesse or how he was doing. And when I asked about that, the answers were simply out of fear. "Oh gosh, well, if we ask him how he's doing and he says he's not okay, I don't think we have the skills and tools to handle that. What if we remind him about the tragedy?" All of these things. And it taught me a very valuable lesson. And it was hard for me to be angry because, by the way, I think I was that person. Before Jesse's murder, I was the person that would be like, "Oh gosh, a death, that's terrible. Maybe I'll just wait a few weeks till it's flies by." And what I realized was it takes a lot of courage to be present where people are. And that is the important thing, though, when somebody is going through something, to at least even be willing to be present with them. I would tell, the people that were with him in school, I would say, he's not going to say he's not okay. I guarantee it. But you will prove that you have the courage and the interest to just be with him if you'll ask twice. Hey, how you doing? Which is really a rhetorical question in our society. But if you ask it twice, no, hey, really, I want to know, how are you doing? And even if the person isn't ready themselves and they say, I'm fine, again, they know that you really do care and that you have the courage to be with them. And that was a really important lesson. In fact, I got together with Diane Gray of the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation, and we did an extension program that we call Healthy Grieving. And it's more of just awareness, but it's just such a normal part of life that we don't acknowledge, that we don't think about, we certainly don't teach about. And if you love, you're going to grieve. And we're all connected by the want and need to love and be loved. And that means that we're going to lose things that we love, and we're going to grieve. And really what we wanted to do was take away the fear of grieving, so people wouldn't resist and avoid it, that, you know, we could just see it as something that we as human beings do, and it's actually a way to cultivate connection and to bring us closer together.
You know, even hearing you describe that, I'm thinking about the families I've sat with over the years and what they've taught me about that very thing. Where, you know, the being courageous enough to acknowledge what someone is going through, or acknowledge the loss that they've had, or acknowledge the person who they lost. And when we do that, it does connect us. And so it is interesting to me. I saw in a lot of the things I read about your movement, how courage is an important piece to that. And there's choices in that, right? That you have the courage to change the way that we interact with one another, and begin to allow yourself to step out of that shell that, like you said, so often keeps us in a negative space in our lives. The other interesting thing I thought about when you were talking was, I know the name of this show, Let's Talk Death, but so often on this show, we talk about, and you see the connection between death and life, and how much those things connect us, and that those are the very things that we have in common as human beings, but we don't talk about. But we do watch movies about it. We do write about it in books. You know, it's everywhere, but we don't talk about it. And like you said, quite often don't have the courage to approach the people who we care about, you know, when they need us most, to do that.
You know, one of the most amazing things, and I call it just an incredible gift that I've received through this whole experience, is being able to connect with others on a level of pain. It's one of the deepest connections. Now I don't have conversations about wallpaper and decorating and, you know, what you did on Friday night. Now I have conversations like this that are real. After I talk to an audience, I'll have people line up and they want to tell me, they want to share their pain with me because I've been vulnerable with them, and we're connecting. I can connect with anyone now on this really substantial, meaningful level. And it's such an honor and a privilege and a gift.
Well, thank you so much. We only have a few moments left, and I did want to give you the opportunity to kind of have a last word, to share some things. We do have a lot of folks who watch the show who themselves are going through maybe a difficult time. I wanted to give you a chance to just speak to them, and then we also would like for you to share how can folks connect with your movement, reach out, you know, be able to purchase your writings, and really anything you would want.
And where is your movement being displayed now?
Yeah, thank you. So anyone is welcome to come to our website. Everything that we have is on our website, and it's no cost. Jessie Lewis, JESSE LEWIS, chooselove.org. Please come. You can look at the extension programs. That's where the Healthy Grieving program is, but really you can take advantage of anything that we have to offer. And everything is based on a powerful and profound formula that can lead you to choosing love in any situation, circumstance, or interaction. in your life, by thoughtfully responding with love, you are taking your personal power back. I use this formula every single day, all day long. It's a practice. And it really has helped me. And I'd love to share the formula with your audience. It's based on Jesse's Nurturing Healing Love message, but it starts with Jesse's example of courage. He actually saved 9 of his classmates' lives, his first grade classmates' lives, before losing his own life. And that example of courage is the same courage that we all have within us. Jesse was a 6-year-old little boy. He didn't have anything that we don't all have, yet science tells us that courage is like a muscle, and it's something that we have to practice, and we can strengthen it. And really, the courage that I'm talking about and the courage that I practice every day is the courage to be kind when people aren't being kind to you, the courage to do the right thing, to be vulnerable, to speak your truth, to be with people who are grieving, to express your own grief, and to seek out support from other people, to not turn it inward, but to turn it outward and look for other people that you can help within that grief. And then nurturing means loving kindness and gratitude. All of those tens of thousands of thoughts that go through our head every day, the majority of which are negative and repetitive, they go through our head single file. So you can't have a lower energy, angry, resentful, even sad thought and a grateful thought at once. So we call gratitude the great mind shifter. I tick off gratitudes all day long when I want to change my thoughts into a higher energy thought. And then healing literally means forgiveness. Forgiveness has probably been the greatest part of my journey. My choice to forgive, and then the process that it is, because you make a choice, but then it may be a choice that you have to make every day again through the process. But in some instances, definitely mine, it's the only way to take your personal power back and cut that cord that attaches you to pain. And then love is compassion in action. There's an empathetic or identifying component to compassion, but we all know empathy is painful. It's painful for yourself to sit down with somebody else who's grieving, but compassion has an action component too, and that's when you actively do something to help ease another's pain. And even if it is just sitting with somebody, to be mindfully aware that science tells us again that I say all of the nurturing, healing love that we give out, we get back. So when you have the courage to be grateful, even when things aren't going your way, to focus on those gratitudes. When you have the courage to forgive, we know forgiveness is the #1 way to have healthy relationships, and healthy relationships are the key to happiness per Harvard University's 75-year longitudinal study on human life, the longest ever study on human life. And they found the key to happiness was positive relationships. The #1 way to get that is through forgiveness. And then love is the identifying and the action. And when we do that action for somebody else, when we have the courage to step outside of our own pain and suffering, our own busyness and distraction to help somebody else, all that love that we give out comes back to us, and we're choosing love. And when we choose love as a thoughtful response to any situation, circumstance, or interaction, we are taking our personal power back. When we react with prolonged anger, hatred, and revenge, we're literally giving our personal power away. We're becoming victims. And that is the definition of having no power in your life. And that does not feel good. So we want to choose love. I use this formula every day, all day long, and it has really helped me on my grieving journey.
Well, Scarlett, we want to thank you once again for being our guest here at Let's Talk Death, and for sharing your beautiful journey behind the Jesse Lewis Choose Love movement.
Thank you so much, Fran and Andy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Scarlett. You've given our viewers certainly a lot to think about, and we appreciate your time. If you want to learn more about Heal Grief, you can visit the Heal Grief website at healgrief.org. You can also learn more about Heal Grief's program Actively Moving Forward visiting the same site, healgrief.org.
Let's Talk Death episodes will air monthly, so make sure you sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletter for the link for the next month's episode.
So with that, we thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Let's Talk Death.